Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast. My name is Maher Mizai. As always, I'm your host, and as always, this podcast is brought to you by www.africasacountry.com. Today, I'd like you to put on your scouting cap and pull out your clipboard because we're going to be looking at 5 of the most talented youngsters that displayed their talents during the group stage of the 2023-2024 African Champions League. I was looking back on my YouTube channel and I realized that almost a year ago, I made another video very similar to this one where I said these are maybe the top 5 African Champions League talents that will be making a move to Europe in the very near future. And I named Mamelodi Sundowns striker Cassius Mailula, who I believe is still with Toronto FC in the MLS now, so he made the move abroad, although it wasn't to Europe. There was also Mohamed Ali bin Ramadan, the Esperance de Tunis central midfielder, who's now, I believe, at Ferencváros in Hungary. So that's 2 out of 2. The third was Yossiri Bouzok, the Raja Casablanca midfielder, who did not make a move to Europe. He's still at Raja Casablanca, but he's been perhaps one of the best players in the Moroccan league. I believe he's top scorer in the Moroccan league at the moment from a midfield position. So I feel good about that pick. And then finally, the 2 central midfielders that I picked were Mohamed Amin Tougai, also from Esperance de Tunis. He's a central defender. He didn't get a move abroad. Apparently, he was very close to a move with Qatari clubs, but he preferred to stay in Tunisia and perhaps this summer move to a European club. And the other one was Kinito, the Angolan center-half from Petro de Luanda, who had a great year with Petro, whether it was in the AFL or whether it was in the CAF Champions League this year, where Petro are yet to concede a goal. I believe they're 4 goals for and 0 goals against. And he was even called up to the AFCON squad for Las Palancas Negras, who had a great AFCON. But he didn't really play too much with the Angolan national team. But still, I feel good about that call. So I think we'll give ourselves a B+, maybe an A- for some of the scouting that we did last year. We're going to try to do the same thing this year. So this year in the CAF Champions League group stages, players, these are the rules. They have to be 23 years old or younger, and their team has to have qualified to the knockout stages. So these are going to be names that we're going to continue to follow in the weeks to come. And that rules out, I think, a few talented youngsters, but those are the criteria I wanted to impose for this particular video. So number 1 is going to be Amanullah Memish. For those who don't know him, he's 19 years old and he's currently first choice goalkeeper for the Tunisian club Esperance de Tunis. This year, he has 15 clean sheets in 20 matches. And in the Champions League in particular, he has 6 clean sheets in 7 matches. Those are statistics that I think any goalkeeper anywhere in the world would be very, very happy with, right? And the match that he did concede a goal in the Champions League, because he was 6 for 7, they lost to El Hilal 3-1. In those 3 goals he conceded, one of them was a penalty, one of them was an own goal, and then one of them was 1 versus 1, a striker clear on goal with him, the goalkeeper. And so he's not really to blame for either of those. Now, Amanullah Memish, for him to break out now is a great time for Tunisia. We talked about Tunisia in previous episodes and said that maybe they're over the hill and they're starting to... I was worrying about the future of Tunisian football because, the federation president is in jail, and I was wondering what this new generation of players, where they're coming from. But actually, if you look at Esperance de Tunis, they have a few youngsters that I think could take over the mantle, and one of them is Memish. Memish is... Tunisia in the past, they had 4 goalkeepers that they kept rotating. There was Belbouli, there was Ben Sherifiya, there was Ben Mustafa, and Muaz Hassan. They just took over one after the other, one of them would be starter for 1 year and then they would commit a really bad error and then another one comes in, and it was like a rotating basis. And then about 18 months ago, it was Ayman Dahman that really locked in the starting goalkeeper role, but none of them ever really convinced. We never really thought that, this is the goalkeeper that's going to be the starting goalkeeper of the Tunisian national team for the next 10 years. And Tunisia has a very rich history of goalkeeping. In the 60s, a player like Atouga, Sadok Sassi, one of the greatest African goalkeepers of all time. Everybody knows Shukri El Waad and his run with Esperance de Tunis and the Tunisian national team in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, it's, in my opinion, it's in the blood of Tunisians. They need a goalkeeper, and I think Mimish can be this player that holds down the fort for the national team for the next 10 to 15 years if he continues to progress as we expect him to. What's good about him? In my opinion, he has good distribution. I mean, he's not Ederson, who's making, pinpoint passes from 60 yards across, but he does have good distribution. I really like his instincts. When it's a split-second decision, when a ball's coming in very quickly and then there's a last-second deflection, those kind of instant reaction instincts, that's what I like about him and Mush, and that's where I think he's kind of elite. His positioning is really good, and his leadership is good for a 19-year-old. You could see him, speaking to his defenders, not ordering them around, but showing that he has personality and character and strength. So, 19 years of age, number one goalkeeper for Esperance de Tunis. I think people were surprised that he wasn't selected for the AFCON squad, as 27 players could have been called up. But at the same time, I saw a lot of Esperance supporters say, maybe it's a good thing for him if he isn't called up. Let's give him a little bit of time. Let's not put him under pressure. It's even been reported that his father was happy that he wasn't called up to the Tunisian national team at the moment, as the Tunisian national team was kind of seen as a mess. But now if they're going to start rebuilding with players like him, players like the right fullback, Raid Bouchniba, who could be another player on this list, young, talented Tunisians. We're turning the page from the older generation, and we're going to, build towards the World Cup 2026. I think this could be a good time for him to be called up this international window and to become perhaps the starter of the Tunisian national team. All right, number 2. Let me just take a quick sip of coffee. All right, number 2 is going to be Shekou Fana from Mali, 20 years old, and currently plays at TP Mazembe. I like this guy's story because, it reminds me of another era of African football when you would play in the Confederation Cup or you would play in the Champions League, and, the richer team would see, a young creative talent, and they would say, who's this kid? How old is he? Can we sign him? Who's his agent? Because nowadays, with the big clubs, it's Y Scout, you don't really need to scout in person. You rarely discover players in person. Everything is online or technology or agents sending you a highlight reel on WhatsApp. But Shekou Fana was playing for Real Bamako last season in Group D of the 2022-2023 CAF Confederation Cup. You know who else was in Group D? TP Mazembe. And the second match, which I believe was in Mali, if I'm not mistaken, which Bamako won 2-1, Fofana started as a left winger. And he impressed. Although he didn't score, he didn't assist, he really impressed. And after the match, Mazembe, asked about him, and that summer they purchased him. And this year, he has 5 goals in elite interclub competitions. So he scored 1 goal against Esperance de Tunis in the African Football League, which Mazembe participated in. And he has 4 goals in this current iteration of the CAF Champions League. Now, 2 of them came, in the preliminary stages against Niassa Big Bullets from Malawi, and 2 of them came in one match against Nouadhibou. But still, for a 20-year-old to start consistently to score important goals, he has that gene in him where he scores really important goals. He's caught my eye, and I think he should be one to pay attention to. Now, what kind of player is he? I really like this profile of player because he's a winger, but he's really good in the air. He's very powerful, great instincts, and very good in the air. He isn't the most technical winger. He's not going to dribble, 4 or 5 players, juggle with the ball, hit a perfectly curved cross. But he's very powerful, and he's a matchup problem for opposing fullbacks. So if you look at his goals that he scored, for example, this season in the elite interclub competitions, 3 out of the 5 have come off of crosses. Actually, it might be 4 out of 5, if I'm not mistaken, come from crosses, whether in the air or whether they're low crosses. He has the anticipation, the goal-scoring instincts, and he overpowers the opposing fullbacks when he's crashing in on goal. And I really like that about him. He's a perfect sort of pair if you have a short, creative winger on the other side that likes to cross the ball, and he sort of attacks the far post. I really like that profile. It reminds me of when Algeria used to have Hilal Soudani on one side and Soufiane Fagouli on the other. And Fagouli would always put in these crosses, and Soudani, which was much more of a second striker, would attack the fullbacks and create matchup problems there. So Sheikh Omar Fofana, definitely one to keep an eye on. I think he's going to score more important goals in the knockout stages. But he's not really your technical winger. Your technical player perhaps is striker slash winger. He's more of a striker probably. Tashreeq Matthews. I had to throw in a Sundowns player. I'm not always like sucking up to Sundowns because there's a lot of Sundowns fans that watch this page. But I only caught a little bit of this guy playing against Mazembe actually. Last week, and I really liked his technique, even his style. Skinny and lanky and the low socks, and as soon as he touched the ball, I said, there's something about him. And I think that's what Borussia Dortmund saw when they signed him when he was just, I think, 19 or 20 years old. They realized what a special talent he was. They signed him. He never broke out at Borussia Dortmund, and he had to be loaned out to Swedish clubs. I think it was Helsingborgs, to really get playing time. And then he had sort of had to bounce around Sweden from club to club to club to club to finally get playing time. But as of last season, he played 30 matches in the top division in Sweden. He scored 10 goals and he had 10 assists, which is really good, for a club Sirius that finished 8th in the league. And for him to be sort of solidify his status in Sweden, in Europe, and you would think that, at just the age of 23 years old, he could perhaps pursue a long career in Europe, but he comes back to Sundowns. This is something that I think is really interesting because this isn't unique to South African players, the returning home, because everybody, as a young player, you're always dreaming of Europe, but Egyptian players as well, and some North African players, Maghrebian players, the clubs have enough money where they can pay a better salary than the smaller clubs in Europe, Instead of playing for a small club in Belgium or playing for a small club in Portugal or Sweden or Latvia, why not come home, play at the biggest club in your country, and that's going to get you more exposure and more eyes. Because to be completely honest, how many South African football fans are watching the Swedish national team? I know the coach he has to watch all eligible players, but the fact that Tashreeq Matthews wasn't really involved too much in the South African national team setup, despite the fact, remember, we thought that South Africa needed striking talent. They had Evidence Makopa going into the tournament, but with the Lyle Foster being out, with Lebo Mothiba being out, maybe Matthews could have been a good solution, but he was never really considered. And I think he realized that to be considered, maybe I need to play well at home. And you have like Peter Shalulile getting a little bit older. You have Temba Zwane, who's not a striker really, but playing in attacking positions, getting really older. I think this was a perfect buy for Sundowns. And as long as he, keeps his shooting boots on, he gets his confidence. He's now getting paid very well. He's at the biggest club in South Africa, one of the biggest in Africa. I really like this move, and I think he's going to have to start shining now in the knockout stages, right? He only played one match in the group stage, so this wasn't really a selection on this list from what he did in the group stages. It's more what I think he can do in the knockout stages. So Tashreeq Matthews, one we have to keep an eye on. Finally, let's talk about another attacking player at ASEC Mimosa of Abidjan, Serge Poku Nguessan, 23 years old. In my opinion, ASEC Mimosa's really their best players have been their center half pairing. We spoke about this in a previous video, Juan Koulibaly and Anthony Trabi. But Serge Poku has been their best attacking player. And he plays on the left wing. He's very short, like 1m70, 1m72. He's not really like a tall, physical winger like Sheikh Omar Fofana is from TP Mazembe. But he is still very, very dangerous when attacking crosses. Surprisingly, he scores some headers. He scores from low crosses. And he is really the offensive creative output of the team. He specializes really in getting a dribble, dribbling past his fullback, getting down the byline, putting in a low cross. Or if the ball is on the other side of the pitch, involving himself when the ball comes in on a cross, whether that's a low cross or a high cross. So really specializes in working the wide areas of the final third of the pitch on either side. So I really like Serge Poku. I think he can be one of ASEC Mimosa's next exports. Remember, ASEC Mimosa have a great reputation of exporting top talent to Europe. I think Serge Poku perhaps could be the next one I don't see him playing, at like a Champions League level, but perhaps, a smaller club in France or something like that. So those are the four names. I said four names, yeah. Amanullah Memish, Sheikh Omar Fofana, Teshrik Matthews, and Serge Poku. Let's go for one more. How about Petro de Luanda's Gilberto? Gilberto, if you recall, we did the Angola preview ahead of the AFCON, and there was Mbala Nzola, the Fiorentina striker from Angola, the star player that refused the call-up, yeah? And it was sort of like last minute. That people weren't really expecting Angola to do well. I think many Angolans weren't expecting them to do as well as they did. So Mbala Nzola refuses the call-up. Gilberto is the last man called up by Pedro Gonçalves, the coach of Angola. And I was looking forward to... I thought he would be called up in the original 27 because I watched him in the Chan here in Algeria, 15 months ago now, 16 months ago. And for me, he was one of the best players in the Chan. He's really noticeable because, he's got usually like these really flashy yellow boots and he's got yellow dyed hair, blonde dyed hair. And he's just such a great dribbler. And he makes that beautiful pass in that round of 16 match where Angola, I believe when they beat Namibia, when they won, I think 3-0 or 4-0. Man, in the final third of the pitch, he's a problem every single time. I think he can improve his end product. I don't think he scores as many goals as he should. But dribbling, he's probably the best dribbler of everybody on this list. So let's add Gilberto in there. And I think because of his great performance at the African Cup of Nations, going from the last player selected to a starting player for Angola, I think, clubs, they'll have watched his performance at the AFCON. If he does well in the advanced stages here of the CAF Champions League, I think Gilberto could be one of those players that maybe finds a club in Portugal. There's that lusophone connection between a country like Angola and a lot of Portuguese clubs. But he is going to have to take responsibility, and because Pedro de Luanda, I believe, have scored 4 goals, conceded none, you're going to have to score more goals. So he's going to have to take a little bit more responsibility, in my opinion, and improve his end product. So that's it. Those are 5 players that I think, will really, really impress in the knockout stages of the African Champions League. As an honorable mention, let's mention some names that are not necessarily going to be playing in the knockout stages, but I think did well in the group stages. From Wydad Casablanca, we have Montasser Lahtimi, 22-year-old or 23-year-old. I believe 22-year-old attacking player, like number 10 or sometimes on the wing, playing for Wydad Casablanca, but currently on loan from Trabzonspor. So he was playing in Morocco, bought by Trabzonspor. The club Fus Rabat that sold him have a 17% sell-on fee. He signed a 3+1, so almost like a 4-year contract with Trabzonspor. For some reason, he wasn't getting too much game time. Comes back to Wydad Casablanca, and I think has been pretty impressive for the current reigning Moroccan champions. Lionel Wamba, the Cameroonian striker currently playing at Sierra Belouizdad, has scored a lot of goals. At times, I thought he could be frustrating initially. Because I didn't think he was great with his back to goal or facing goal. Thought he could be a little bit slow at times and a little bit clumsy with his technique. He's a left-footed player. I wanted him to be a little more incisive, a little more dynamic. But credit to him. He scored a lot of goals, more goals than we expected him to for Sierra Belouizdad in the Champions League and in the Algerian League. His teammate Akram Bourras, very technical, well-rounded midfielder who can play as a 6 or an 8, mostly an 8, and sometimes even a 10. And then how about some shout-outs for our goalkeepers, our African goalkeepers? Besides Amanullah Memish, who we mentioned from Esperance Tunis, we have Felix Kiai from Mediama in Ghana, Issa Fofana, I believe, who's an Ivorian goalkeeper for Al Hilal. And shout-out to Daniel Adju, who's a good follow on Twitter. I'm going to put his Twitter bio below, who shouted out before me, all these young goalkeepers making their names on the African continent in the African Champions League. Because I believe Felix K is 20, and I believe Issa Fofana is also 20, and Amanullah Memish is 19. So great for African clubs to be, testing these goalkeepers at such a young age. I think that's really, really good news. So that's it. Let me know if I missed anybody. If you think there are some talented under 23 players that we should be looking out for in the knockout stages in the comments below. Haven't been responding to many comments, but I'm going to do a better job of that now. But thanks for listening, as always, and we'll speak soon. Take care. Peace.